This is a test for the live stream to check that you can hear the audio. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today on the event where we will explore the pathways to promoting the development of a sustainable and inclusive bioeconomy through trade policy action. The bioeconomy is a broad and a multifaceted concept encompassing basically most economic sectors that rely on biological resources. This could range from primary production such as crops, livestock, forestry, fisheries, and related processing and servicing industries, including food, paper, textiles, chemicals, energy. Trade policies are a powerful tool in achieving a sustainable bioeconomy, and they're always actively discussed in a number of WTO bodies, including the Committee on Trade and Environment, but also the committees on agriculture, technical barriers to trade, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, also the TRIPS Council. Member-led initiatives such as the TESG, the Dialogue on Plastic Pollution, and the FSR initiatives also touch upon various aspects of this intersection between trade, the bioeconomy, and biodiversity. The bioeconomy is increasingly recognized as a catalyst for green transformation and economic resilience. This recognition is evidenced in the discussions among WTO members, especially at the CTE, with several members recently explicitly referring to their bioeconomy strategies in their interventions. Against this background, today's discussion is hosted in collaboration with esteemed partners from the Food and Agriculture Organization, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Trade and Environment Program, the World Wildlife Fund, and UN Trade and Development. Our aim is to provide you with updates on recent initiatives and ongoing work of these organizations as they relate to the bioeconomy in its various facets, and particularly focusing on the trade dimension. Following these presentations, several WTO members have also kindly agreed to brief us on their national bioeconomy strategies, sharing their insights and experience. And without further ado, I would first of all like to give the word to Ambassador Erwin Bollinger, Chairperson of the Committee on Trade and Environment. Ambassador Bollinger will provide opening remarks and will provide you with some valuable insights into the work of the committee and how it intersects with the topic on biodiversity. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, good afternoon. It's really courageous of you to being in a room without a window on such a lovely summer day. And it also symbolizes, of course, your dedication. But I fully understand those who have decided to stay outside. Around the globe, economies are increasingly adopting dedicated bioeconomy strategies, with about 60 countries pursuing bioeconomy-related policies. But there is no universal definition of the bioeconomy, and countries use different metrics to estimate its growth, deepening on the specific region's vision and sectors of interest. Its importance seems widely recognized. An increasing number of measures related to the bioeconomy have also been notified to the WTO, with members pursuing a variety of objectives in support of the renewable energy transition, biodiversity and ecosystems, plant and animal protection, or management of chemical, toxic, and hazardous substances. These trends are reflected in the work of the Committee on Trade and Environment. Many members have recently emphasized the significance of the bioeconomy, focusing on critical questions such as how can we sustain economic development while protecting the environment? How can we ensure the responsible production and consumption of biological resources? And how can we harness biological knowledge to support economic growth across industries? First, the bioeconomy is about economic development and ecological sustainability. In their discussions, CT members have consistently highlighted the role of trade for sustainable development in various forms. Specifically, members have discussed how trade and environmental measures can efficiently promote the circular economy and thus contribute to the sustainable use of natural resources. For instance, in events organized during the 2022 and 2023 Trade and Environment Weeks, discussion showed that a transition towards a more resource-efficient and circular economy has broadened the linkages with international trade through cross-border supply chains, end-of-life value chains, and services trade. And that open trade and cooperation are important to enable international remanufacturing markets and provide opportunities for countries to take advantage of the environmental and cost benefit of a remanufactured product. More than 1,500 measures related to waste management and conservation have also been notified by WTO members, and several of them have shared their initiatives at the CTE. A second dimension of the bioeconomy relates to the use of biological resources for economic purposes. The bioeconomy fosters technological breakthroughs across sectors such as agriculture, food production, energy, and industrial applications. For instance, emerging technologies like synthetic biology present opportunities to accelerate bioeconomic growth while catalyzing sustainable transformations of the global economy. CTE discussions have highlighted how trade policies are crucial for increasing access to new technologies, but also for ensuring just transition and sustainability. For example, recent proposals on the improved functioning of the CTE have focused on ways to facilitate and promote development and transfer of environmentally sound technologies, and on the role of technologies in facilitating growth and the green transition in developing economies. Members part of the dialogue on plastic pollution have also provided relevant updates to the CTE, for instance, on the importance of trade for enabling markets of sustainable and effective alternatives and substitutes to plastics. A third focus of the bioeconomy is on preserving biodiversity, empowering local communities, and safeguarding indigenous knowledge. CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, has had observer status in the CTE since 1997. It has contributed to the WTO members' discussions on issues like illegal logging and ensuring legal, sustainable, and traceable trade in wildlife. A good example given by CITES about the role of trade is the recovery of vicuñas through regulated trade. Trade in vicuña fiber now requires a mark of origin, which has enhanced sustainability, traceability, and legal trade. WTO members have notified more than 1,800 trade measures with the aim to address biodiversity loss since 2009. CT members also regularly report on policy developments and raise biodiversity concerns, such as timber trade in tropical forests and land use changes from soy and palm oil trade. For instance, members have shared their sustainable forest management initiatives and rules on deforestation-free products. In conclusion, the work of the CT is vital in integrating trade and environmental policies to promote sustainable economic development. Through collaboration and innovative trade measures, members have demonstrated how they can ensure a balanced approach that protects our planet while fostering economic growth. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this very informative presentation. It's indeed great to understand a little bit more about the many linkages between the CT work and the topic of the bioeconomy. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I will move then to turn to my colleagues from the international organizations in the next segment, where we'll be able to understand a little bit more about their work that's undertaken currently in the context of the bioeconomy and its different dimensions. So first of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Lev Neretin. He's a team lead on environment of the Food and Agriculture Organization. He's joining us online. And Lev has kindly agreed to, first of all, begin his presentation by introducing the discussion with an outline of the concept of the biodiversity and what it means as a definition. He will then share with us, more specifically, the FAO's vision for a bioeconomy that's based on sustainable agriculture and food. Lev, I hope you are able to join us.
Yes, I can, but I cannot use my video. Thank you, Svetlana. Excellencies and esteemed colleagues, I think I will start. Let me put my presentation on the screen. Hopefully you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can see. Thank you very much.
Even if you don't see my face, I hope you can see the presentation. So thank you so much, and I really would like to thank WTO for this opportunity to speak, to address this important forum, and first and foremost to bring bioeconomy discussion to Geneva. The story of bioeconomy unfolds against the backdrop of increasing pressures on natural resources, where the need for balanced approach to economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social equity is more pronounced than ever. Over the past 50 years, the absolute extraction of biomass worldwide almost doubled. Agriculture as a major source of biomass production is also one of primary contributors to climate change, biodiversity loss, and water stress. And again, I would not repeat those numbers, but they are really staggering. To address the projected increase in the global population to 9.7 billion by 2050, it is imperative to significantly escalate biomass production for food, feed, fiber, and fuel, and doing it sustainably. And this amount is almost 50% above the levels of 2012. Therefore, in order to increase this biomass production, which bioeconomy aims to, we have to reconcile, and we have to, as Ambassador Bollinger mentioned, we have to do it sustainably across all three dimensions of sustainability, but also ensuring proper governance mechanism. So therefore, this shift from rather linear fossil-based economies to more circular and bio-based economies is associated with significant trade-offs if we want, again, to ensure benefits which I mentioned. There is no universally agreed definition of bioeconomy, and within FAO, in the frame of our strategic framework for the next decade, we adopted the definition of the Global Bioeconomy Summit a couple of years ago, which you can see on the screen, where bioeconomy encompasses all those dimensions of production, utilization, conservation, regeneration of biological resources, use of science, technology, and innovation, both, let's say, traditional science, what we understand, but also traditional knowledge of indigenous communities and local communities. But it also includes information, products, processes, and services, which surround production of biological resources. The bioeconomy, as again Ambassador Bollinger mentioned, the bioeconomy is gaining increasing global attention among countries. We are tracing at FAO those developments, and this year we recorded that 23 countries and 3 regions, including European Union, Nordic countries, and Eastern Africa, have dedicated bioeconomy strategies. 17 of the strategies are currently under development, and over 35 countries have bioeconomy related strategies. So when the mention of bioeconomy is included in a number of other strategies. A dedicated national bioeconomy strategies take on different forms depending on the context. We identified about 15 common sustainability objectives which countries pursue when they develop their bioeconomies. Among them, safeguarding food security, substituting fossil fuel-based products with sustainable bioproducts, incentivizing the sustainable and efficient use of biological resources, mitigating and adapting to the effects of climate change, creating jobs, revitalizing economies, and establishing fair and equitable value chains. So these objectives are spanning across, and there are many of them, we were able to map them to SDG targets. They're spanning across social, economic, and environmental dimension of bioeconomy, but also we want to mention the importance of creating appropriate governance mechanisms, as I mentioned, because bioeconomy is associated with significant benefits, but also significant trade-offs. And it's a holistic and multi-sectoral approach, which requires sophisticated level, I would say, of coordination and alignment and policy coherence. FAO recognized critical importance of bioeconomy in 2015, about 10 years ago, following the Global Agricultural Ministers meeting, which gave a mandate to the organization. Almost the same year, we established International Sustainable Bioeconomy Group to foster collaboration. A significant milestone of this group was development of 10 aspirational principles and 24 criteria to ensure sustainability of bioeconomy. In 2021, bioeconomy became a strategic priority area, as I mentioned in our framework for the next decade. And I think FAO still remains the only UN organization which elevated bioeconomy to this strategic level of engagement. We have been working on a lot of knowledge products, which I briefly mentioned in the next slides. A few words about this particular strategic program area, Bioeconomy for Sustainable Food and Agriculture. This program area is rooted very much in the SDG 12, although it serves many other SDGs. We aim to balance economic value with social welfare and environmental sustainability. And the program focuses on two major let's say, areas of interventions. One, in the policy side, the normative work, development of integrated evidence-based policies and practices, and another one on scaling up innovations, bioeconomy innovations on the ground. In the past decade, we developed a comprehensive knowledge base on bioeconomy. We developed bioeconomy guidelines, normative instruments. We supported 3 countries to develop their national bioeconomy strategies. Namibia launched it recently. Uruguay is coming very soon. We also supported countries with bioeconomy, with the more holistic approach to bioeconomy developments, those ones already mentioned, but also in investments in Pakistan, Barbados, Bolivia, Cote d'Ivoire. And they span a very broad range of bioinnovations, from transforming banana waste into textile in Pakistan, promoting women-led enterprises in Abidjan, using black soldier fly larvae, also upscaling various innovations across agricultural subsectors in fisheries and aquaculture, but also in forestry in the countries which mentioned in this slide. It's just one slide. I think several speakers today will particularly emphasize the strong links between biodiversity agenda and bioeconomy. We did a publication a couple of years ago where we mapped Kunming Montreal biodiversity framework and targets against biodiversity. At least 6 of them are very closely connected to the goals of bioeconomy, and they are listed on this slide. And you could see the interventions range, I mean, the targets range from bioremediation and use of bioremediation technologies to biotechnologies and various innovations in multiomics, development of local value chains, bioprospecting, and again, very important, as we often use bioeconomy language together with the circular bioeconomy, sustainable bioeconomy, various circular processes which creating additional value. Coming back to the message of sustainability, which is absolutely central in bioeconomy development, because bioeconomy is not intrinsically sustainable. And this is, I think, the responsibility of multilateral institutions, and not only, to ensure that bioeconomy developments are proceeding in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainability principles, also including governance. As already mentioned, the 10 aspirational principles and 24 criteria, which we are developed as a guidance for countries to ensure sustainability of bioeconomy. We also analyzed and assessed various indicators to substantiate those criteria. I want to mention that Principle 8, which were developed among those ones, specifically addresses the importance that sustainable bioeconomy should promote sustainable trade and market principles, and it aims to expand local economies through biomass trade while considering potential risks to food security and socio-economic issues. Global bioeconomy perspectives highlight the importance of considering trade impacts on countries' abilities to develop sustainable bioeconomies, because unsustainable practices such as unequal value-adding processes and trade tariffs, for example, favoring raw material exports, need to be addressed. Some countries, and I would like to mention Austria, Colombia, Germany, Italy, Norway, and Regional Strategy for East Africa, explicitly mention the importance of sustainable trade in their dedicated bioeconomy strategies. And just one word about very important initiatives happening now under the presidency of Brazil of G20. The G20 initiative on bioeconomy is currently developing high-level principles on bioeconomy, and the latest, for example, draft includes references to trade. We also noticed the G20 Trade and Investment Working Group recently discussed sustainable development measures which are related to trade, and I think this also discussions are relevant in the context what we have today. We soon will release a global report on bioeconomy, which identifies various gaps. And I would like to mention 6 of them. There is a need to establish multi-stakeholder bioeconomy partnership to ensure inclusive, diverse, and regionally balanced perspectives, because the landscape is quite fragmented at the moment. It's important to foster global, national, local partnerships to strengthen integration of bioeconomy and global policies related to sustainable development. Especially, I would like to reference multilateral environmental agreements and co-designing those strategies with local communities, facilitating access to investments for developing countries to overcome financial barriers and accelerate transitions to sustainable bioeconomy, promoting sustainable trade. Technology transfer, knowledge sharing, still important to continue collecting data and consolidating lessons learned. And last but certainly not least, there is an important equity and inclusion element that bioeconomy development without empowering youth, women, and indigenous communities is destined for failure. Therefore, we have to ensure that bioeconomy is inclusive and accessible to all sectors of society, particularly the most vulnerable. Thank you very much for your attention. So we have a website, and I understand we could share with you this presentation where there would be additional materials, and I'm looking very much forward to other speakers and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lev, for this very interesting presentation. I note that what you mentioned is that the bioeconomy is not sustainable per se. So we have to ensure that there's a balance between all the 3 social, economic, and environmental dimensions of it. And that requires policy action and also coherence or cooperation. I also note these G20 principles on the biodiversity that are being developed, and if trade is going to be mentioned in them, that's a very interesting opportunity. So thank you. I move straight to the next speaker, and I would like to introduce again online Ms. Bianca Lisboa da Camara, Brazil. She is Program Manager for Business Engagement at the Convention on Biological Diversity. The protection of biodiversity is one important aspect of the bioeconomy. Bianca will tell us a little bit more about this dimension and specifically about the newly adopted Global Biodiversity Framework. Bianca, you have the floor.
Thank you, Svetlana. I cannot get my video on. I think I need the host to allow. Okay, thank you. So let me just begin by thanking the WTO for the kind invitation. It is an honor to be able to join the meeting and to share information on the work of the convention on biological diversity and the global biodiversity framework, of course. In 2022, 196 parties to the convention adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which will be the blueprint for how we manage and safeguard biodiversity and its resources all over the world. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the GBF has 4 global goals looking into 2050, which are protect and restore, including provisions to areas of natural ecosystems substantially increased, integrity of all ecosystems maintained, enhanced or restored. Extinction rate and risk of all species are reduced, at least by tenfold. Abundance of native wild species is increased and genetic diversity is maintained. Prosper in nature, including a view that biodiversity is sustainably used and managed in nature's contributions to people are valued, maintained, enhanced, or restored. Sharing benefits fairly, where sharing of benefits from genetic resources and digital sequence information substantially increased. And finally, invest and collaborate, focusing on adequate means of implementation, closing the biodiversity finance gap of $700 billion per year, and aligning financial flows with the GBF. Parties are now working very hard to translate these global goals and targets into national frameworks, legislation, and regulations, and the links and potential repercussions to trade are quite explicit. Agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and many other sectors, such as mentioned by my colleague from FAO, will be impacted, and having the discussion today is very timely and critical to better understand how trade can be a force for good if done sustainably. Bioeconomy, as a cross-cutting concept, is very much linked and focused on components of biodiversity, and thus we are very interested in learning and understanding better how the GBF and bioeconomy can relate and support each other. If we could go to the next slide, please. In the interest of time, I will try to quickly just end the intervention by sharing that the next UN Biodiversity Conference will be held on the 21st of October to the 1st of November in Colombia, in the city of Cali. Governments will review the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and will show the alignment of their national biodiversity strategies and action plans, or NBSAPs, with the framework. We expect that further developments on the monitoring framework will be established, as well as advance on the discussions on resource mobilization strategy and a global fund for biodiversity. We also hope to finalize the multilateral mechanism on the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, among many other issues. If we could go to slide 4, please. In parallel of the official negotiations, a number of events will be hosted by the CBD to ensure the engagement with the broader community. It is expected that more than 10,000 people gather in Cali in October, and we hope to make the most of the attention, the interest, and engagement and action. At COP16, the CBD Secretariat will launch the GBF Pavilion, a space for dialogues, sessions, events, which will spotlight cross-cutting issues that are critical to our work. As you can see in the graphic being shown, on October 26th, we do have a trade day, which I believe my colleague panelist Lorena will be able to share more details in. And I just wanted to also highlight that many other parallel events are planned. We have a Women Forum planned, Nature and Culture Summit looking into the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in the governance of the biodiversity at the global level. Science Forum looking into the science and the technical needs to support implementation. A Business and Biodiversity Forum, which hopefully will be able to bring together a number of business representatives, but also policymakers, civil society, etc., to discuss how businesses can also support implementation. A forum, cities and subnationals, looking into local governments, provinces and states. A finance and biodiversity day, and of course side events and all the programming on the GBF pavilion. So all of this will be taking place on the Blue Zone. I look forward to meeting some of you there. I thank you for your time and the opportunity, and I remain available should you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bianca, indeed, for giving us an insight on the GBF and also the upcoming CBD COP16 in Cali, Colombia. I note also that next year's Climate COP30 that's going to take place in Brazil is also going to have the bioeconomy as one of the themes that will be announced in this context. Straight moving on to the next speaker, Mr. Jason Gray, Senior Vice President for Market Transformation at the World Wildlife Fund, WWF. Jason, thank you very much for joining us again virtually. And Jason will introduce the ongoing projects of the WWF, and he'll highlight some specific linkages in the context of trade. Jason, thank you very much, and please, you have the floor.
Thank you. So with some speed, I'll dispense with the pleasantries and just say that we've heard a lot about bioeconomy. I want to talk about it in a slightly different way. I'll be presenting two types of global solutions that we're working on with some other organizations in this room. One is Codex Planetarius, and the other is the 1% solution. But I think it's important that we maybe start with 5 realities of the bioeconomy at this point in time that we can't really forget about. One is that where and how we produce food and soft commodities has historically had the biggest impact of any human activity on the planet. Climate change is actually accentuating this, while at the same time reducing the net primary productivity of renewable natural resources. The second is that the least efficient 10 to 20% of producers of any food or other kind of bioeconomy commodity cause 60 to 80% of the impacts, but produce only 5 to 10% of the product. This needs to be informing our solutions as we go forward. Voluntary standards, as the third point, have showed us that they reward better producers, but don't actually move the bottom, which is where the problem is. To put the bottom in perspective, if we need a 60 to 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and I would argue other key impacts in the food system to address climate change and increasing food needs, we only can achieve that by reducing the impacts of the poorest performers. They are 60 to 80% of global impacts for every commodity. Global trade in food is increasing twice as fast currently as production, and is now about 30% of all food. And climate change is actually increasing the need for trade because of weather variability in any country in any given year. Companies are actually now realizing that the 50% of their product that they lock in is no longer certain anymore, and they're buying from maybe 75% of their product from producers they've never heard of or worked with in the past. Finally, global consumers currently aren't paying for the environmental impacts of the production of the food they consume. And these costs are passed on to the environment, in some cases to the societies and the governments, in others to the producers. So I think this is all important backdrop for now talking about the two solutions that I mentioned. The first is a multi-year proof of concept called Codex Planetarius, and it's being explored as one of the solutions or the types of solutions we need. Codex is a proposed set of minimum performance standards to ensure that global food trade meets demand without undermining the renewable natural resource base of exporting countries and those countries that we're going to depend on increasingly for trade in food going forward. The goal is to maintain or improve the renewable natural resource base of exporting countries And the proposal is to develop science-based minimum performance standards to address the 6 to 8 most significant environmental impacts of producing globally traded food. The impacts that are being focused on include habitat loss, biodiversity loss, soil health, water take, water effluent, and greenhouse gas emissions. The approach is similar to Codex Alimentarius for food, health, and safety. This is more about Codex Planetarius for the health and safety of the planet, if you will, by reducing these impacts. The work is coordinated with the GEF, with the World Bank and its FOLUR program, and activities going on simultaneously in conjunction with the FAO. The research is being undertaken by globally respected scientists and then peer-reviewed in a cumulative way to build consensus about the impacts, about the differences of opinions about them, as well as where there is agreement, and then made available for public comment. There'll be 4 to 6 pilots undertaken over the next year to understand how Codex could be implemented, as well as what its impacts could be, positive and negative. A parallel body of work that we're undertaking is on the 1% solution. Its goal is to cover the cost of reducing the impacts of globally traded food and make the food system more sustainable and resilient in the process. So the strategy is a 1% environmental service payment on the export of key food items to cover the cost of reducing the key environmental impacts of how those items are produced. Funds are going to be used to help the poor performing producers reduce their key impacts and be eligible to export food products, or to find other crops or activities that would allow them to do less harm. We're developing a proof of concept for this work in Brazil over the next year, and funding raised in Brazil appears to be on the order of about $1 billion a year on this 1% environmental free just coming out of Brazil, which is equal to Brazil's Embrapa's entire annual budget. We think it's going to be used to address, this funds can be used to address the key impacts and issues such as obtaining land titles, licenses, and permits, making producers legal, in other words, reforesting illegally cleared areas, establishing traceability and monitoring programs, buying conservation easements for lands that producers could clear but voluntarily decide not to, and rehabilitating degraded land, as well as using inputs more efficiently. The 1% solution funding could be invested directly, or it could be used to leverage other funds, green development funds, sustainable development fund bonds, etc. So thank you for the time. There's a lot more information about these programs that I'd be happy to send, as well as some of the background information that I gave at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. And first of all, apologies. Think we might have some glitch in the system, so that online speakers are not able to show their faces. But also, thank you very much for this very important reality check on how food production causes environmental impact, and especially the least efficient producers, 20%, you understand.
Can I just make one more comment? Because I wanted to reply to something that the first speaker mentioned, which is that we need 50% more food by 2050. That's actually how much food we need to meet the need of increased consumption. But given the inefficiency of today's food system and food loss and waste at about 40% globally, plus we're going to add, it appears now, about 10% more loss from climate, disrupting or delaying planting, etc. We actually have to produce half again more food in order to be left with a net 50%. So we need to actually produce 75% in order to have 50% that people are actually consuming, unless we eliminate food loss and waste and climate loss. Now, I don't see us doing that right now. I don't see us making the efforts to actually make those reductions. So I think we should be aiming at a higher target, which is closer to reality.
Thank you, Jason. This is very, 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 very insightful, and it's good that there are some solutions in the making, at least, as you mentioned, the Codex Planetarius and the 1% solution. And we'll be happy to follow up on those. Turning to the next speaker, Lorena Jaramillo Castro, Economic Affairs Officer of UN Trade and Development. Lorena, I completely mispronounced your surname, I'm sorry. Lorena will talk about UNCTAD's Biotrade Initiative, which is one initiative that tightly relates to both trade and the bioeconomy. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bertana, and you pronounce it very well. Thanks so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be today with you today. As mentioned by Bertana, I will be presenting about the work of UN Trade and Development's Biotrade Initiative. So for the past 28 years, the UN Trade and Development has been leading the work on linking trade and biodiversity through the launch of its Biotrade Initiative in 1996. The initiative aims to promote the trade and investment in biological resources to further sustainable development in line with the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. But let me also explain you what is biotrade. So we normally talk with biotrade with the UN Trade and Development with capital B and capital T, which relates to the activities of collection, production, transformation, and commercialization of goods and services derived from terrestrial and marine biodiversity that adhere to a set of sustainability guidelines. These sustainability guidelines are the core of our work, and you can see them in the screen. That's what we call the biotrade principles and criteria. We have 7 principles. The first 3 relate to the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Then the other also cover issues such as socioeconomic sustainability, legal compliance, respect for the rights of actors, and clarity on the right to use and access natural resources. And these principles and criteria are a guideline that has been used by governments, private sector, and civil society since 2007. So we have over a decade of these principles and criteria that have been implemented in the ground. We did an update and finalized that update in 2020 to reflect emerging trends for emerging issues such as the SDG that arrived from when it was developed in early 2000, Paris Agreement, the Nagoya Protocol, and of course the experience of the partners. Just wanted to highlight that the principles and criteria are also recognized like a GBF complementary indicator under the Target 5 that Bianca just presented, and can be applicable to the food, personal care, phytopharma, even nature-based tourism. So how does it work? Maybe I wanted to translate this into a little bit more concrete. So we have this global framework like the SDGs. When we started all of it, there was no SDGs. We had the Commission on Sustainable Development. We also have the MDGs. So we have these global frameworks, and through the biotrade principles and criteria, we translate that into a guideline that can be used to select and assess sectors, value chains, and companies. And in there, you normally identify what are the needs, you address them, and the opportunities that you can capture. We have 2 main work streams. These relate to work at the sector and value chain level, where we have national and regional programs, normally implemented by ministries of environment, trade promotion agencies, ministries of trade, but also civil society. In the screen, you will see like this big 5 topics that are normally covered. In there, we call, for example, there's a lot of work that has been done on novel food and also on market access and business information and market intelligence, for example. And then on the other work stream, we also work with partners to provide assistance to companies, projects, associations that are interested in complying with biotrade principles and criteria, and they assess their practices against these principles. You have a work plan, and then you monitor the results. When I talk to you about biotrade, I always say we, because we at the UN Trade Secretariat, we are collaborating with partners around the world who have been developed these tools, methodologies, and are implementing the activities there at the national, regional, international level. So where biotrade is implemented, right now, biotrade is implemented in over 80 countries in Africa, Americas, Asia, and Europe. Just to give you an idea, the biotrade companies, associations, and projects that are implementing biotrade, the turnover has boosted in recent years, particularly in the last 20 years. We went from millions to billions. Right now, last year's reported sales of biotrade stake organizations amounted 41 billion US dollars. So you have seen, and then in 2003, we were only 40 million. So it has grown radically. It's a very interesting development. And I also wanted to share with you some more concrete examples, being conscious of the time, of some cases. How does this work actually in the ground? So we have in Peru, there's the National Commission for the Promotion of Biotrade. It mobilizes not only the trade and environment actors, but it also mobilizes the production, agriculture, forestry, academia, and business sectors to support SMEs and associations working with native biodiversity in the food supplement subsector to access international markets and become more competitive and sustainable. All this work that has been developed has enabled that the exports to exceed 500 million US dollars since 2020 by promoting a variety of species such as maca, yacon, lucuma physalis, cocoa example. These are a few examples. And I also wanted to highlight in there the logo of the Biotrade Peru. From Peru, they have also developed a biotrade seal for companies that comply, that meet at least 85% of the biotrade principles and criteria and indicators, which can be used for 2 years at the national market. We also have other experience that I'll go briefly, conscious of the time. One is on South Africa. It's been implemented by our ABS initiative, our partner, who's implementing a second-funded program on ABS-compliant biotrade in Southern Africa. It worked with key species such as baobab, aloe ferox, honeybush, marula, and they have their intervention has resulted in an increase of over 3,700 jobs, and also it had boosted the sales of the companies that are working in the program by 51% in national market, but by 178% in international market. And it's also very interesting because they have managed to sustainably manage over 6,200 hectares. And last but not least, I would also like to mention the experience in Vietnam, where we are seeing that the benzoin value chain, they're implementing the biotrade principles and criteria. The benefits, they have seen that not only increased the family income, but it also benefited that the standing tree per se has a higher value by collecting the gum than by cutting the tree. So this really generates an income to the community. And these are just a few examples of the work that we have been doing. And in conclusion, as you can see, we have been, by implementing the biotrade principles and criteria, and by incorporating biodiversity and social considerations into trade-related regulations, governments can provide a framework that incentivizes the efforts to conserve and sustainably use biodiversity by fostering sustainable practice throughout the value chain, provide economic opportunities, particularly for local communities engaged in those efforts, foster the economic diversification of countries, engage actors, because we are always involved in not environment, not only trade, but also culture, and also private sector academia, and we can leverage financial resources and support the mainstreaming of biodiversity in trade. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Lorena, and thank you for presenting us with this overview of what the biotrade principles and criteria are and how they're implemented. I find it fascinating how they're really being implemented in a very specific and different context all over the world. And I think that's a great example of how these economic, social, and environmental dimensions can go hand in hand. Last but not least, I would like to turn to our last speaker from the international organizations, Ms. Beatriz Fernandez. She's a program management officer at the UN Environmental Program, UNEP. She will share with us some key insights from UNEP's regional multi-stakeholder consultations on biodiversity and sustainable development. And Beatriz will also explain some key linkages between trade policies and the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which we heard a little bit about already. Beatriz, please.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. And first of all, my thanks to all of you, to the WTO members for joining us today, for your interest. To Ambassador Bollinger, thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone online. While we are here today in person and some of the audience online, I invite you to travel with me to Asia, Africa, and Latin America in the next couple of minutes, because I know we are running out of time. But last year, through the Trade Development and Environment Hub project, which is funded by the UK government, we had the opportunity to host a series of regional stakeholder consultations in these 3 regions. So I'm going to the next one. And then this is something that is very obvious and you're more knowledgeable than what is already written here, but I just wanted to put in context why we're talking about trade and sustainable agriculture and the linkages with biodiversity, which is what I'm going to share with you about today. Just to put in context, agriculture supports more than 500 million smallholders worldwide. Many of them are women, and this sector has accounted for 4% of the global GDP. So it's quite an important sector. Certainly with UNEP, we are an environmental agency, and that's our mandate, but we fully acknowledge that the social and economic development have to go hand in hand with the environmental protection. And so that is giving us a glimpse that is not only the environmental side of agriculture, but there's also the linkages with the livelihoods of people. At the same time, unfortunately, this sector has also been associated with a large proportion of deforestation, and there's just some figures there, as well as 25% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. FAO has very interesting data that has estimated that actually 570 million farms are currently operating worldwide, and many of them are small holdings. So here I'm trying to deep dive that while of course there's multinational companies driving this sector, there are a lot of smallholders that also become the backbone of agriculture, and in many cases, they are the backbone of their economies in developing countries. And just to put something in context, and in Latin America, and perhaps a bit biased that we're welcoming the Trade Day, and Colombia is hosting this in the COP16. Latin America is actually a region that accounts for 14% of the world food production. And Brazil itself has 15 to 20% of the global biodiversity around the world. So that is really giving us the context of why agriculture in the world is placing such an important role. And in Africa, actually, the African agro market is estimated to be worth up to $150 billion annually. So if we were to untap the investment on nature-based solutions, this can actually produce positive impacts on nature, on climate, but as I've been saying, also on human development, health, and food security. But now we're going to this building a vision. We had these 3 regional consultations, and you see some photos of the people that attended. It was a diversity group of stakeholders with government ministries. Some of you were actually participating there as speakers. We were very glad to welcome Ecuador, Argentina, the UK. And we also had civil society, think tanks, industry partners, smallholders, trade associations. So it was really a very diverse group of stakeholders. And I'll share these, I think the secretary will share the slides later, but you can click on the links if you want to read the reports about them. And basically, these consultations had 2 objectives. The first one was to really take the pulse of the region. So what are the priorities? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities in these regions? And also, what are the best practices? Because there are already good practices in terms of sustainable agriculture, trade facilitating that, and that contributing to the global biodiversity agenda. But here I want to share with you thanks. I want to share with you a consolidated outcomes from these consultations, because I said the first objective of these consultations were to understand what is happening in the regions. And even within the regions, there were a lot of differences between countries, but also synergies. And the second objective was, what's the way forward for the region? So how can we build a vision, and what are the enablers for that region to take forward a more sustainable agriculture sector, an inclusive social and economic development, and what's the role of trade in facilitating that, and how that contributes also to the global biodiversity agenda. So I'm flagging some of those outcomes. I'm not going to go through all of these in the interest of time, but I want to mention a few things that came across the three regions. In terms of challenges, some of those that came across consistently was the competition that exists between multinational companies and smallholders, which are not always provided with enabling conditions so that they can participate in the international trade and market and commercializing their products that sometimes are produced with traditional knowledge and techniques, but also in a sustainable way. The land tenure legality is a big issue for smallholders, that in some cases is about having a land that comes from ancestors and they do not have the official land certificate, and that doesn't allow them to get, for example, access to financial mechanisms. There's another opportunity in terms of traceability systems, which I think is becoming quite prominent, especially in changes in market regulations. And there's also priorities, and I think this has been already raised by different speakers today, but there's a need for a greater inclusion, not only women and youth, but also indigenous peoples, local communities, their knowledge. There's also a need for accessing and having affordable traceability systems, which I just mentioned. But these two angles were really useful to identify three key things across these three regions, as in how do we take this agenda forward. The first one is trade policies can enable market access for all stakeholders. So here, one of the elements is to leverage the trade agreements that currently exist. And one example that came up quite frequently was the AFCFTA, on how through those trade agreements, they can promote a more inclusive, more sustainable and greener economies, and how could that support a more sustainable agriculture sector and also social and economic development. There's also an opportunity to assist countries in seizing the opportunities that are emerging from changes in market regulations. Certainly the Global South is already seeing the changes that are coming up in terms of agriculture, but I think there's also an approach change, as in rather than being just reactive to any potential changes, there's already the opportunity to seize the opportunities that could emerge from that. There's also the need for unlocking access to credit and financial mechanisms, and I think our colleague in FAO has already mentioned that. And this is one proposal that came up quite consistently, was to establish a sort of environmental trust fund that includes agri-commodities, where countries can have the access to those financial resources to enable the transitions that they need to do. There's certainly an interest to prioritize the small and medium-sized holders so they can have access to these credit and bank loans and other financial mechanisms in a more easy way. And there's a third one, which is the innovation in terms of sustainable production systems in agriculture, where there is through agroforestry systems. Certainly the technical assistance and capacity building, I think, is something that always comes in, but more explicitly facilitating those platforms across different stakeholders, where there's that exchange of knowledge, of know-how, of best practices, but also what are the lessons that we can learn and how we can move this together. And the access to technology solutions, because that's becoming quite critical for them to implement their sustainability strategies and practices around sustainable agriculture. And then I close my intervention, and I'm not going to read any of this, but I wanted to share with you that through this partnership that we had in the Trade Hub project that I mentioned, we're very grateful for the UK government to fund this 5-year project. We developed an analytical policy brief that is mapping for each of those global biodiversity targets, what are the trade policy instruments and trade-related measures that could support those targets. What you see here on the screen is those targets that are implicitly linking with trade, but certainly the other targets that are not necessarily here mentioned doesn't mean that they're not linked to trade. And this analytical piece is really going target by target, looking at what is that trade policy interlinkage and what are those policy options. So the intention is to facilitate a sort of menu of policy options so that governments could take a look at this and see how through trade they can help, it can help advance their sustainability targets, and more specifically, the Global Biodiversity Framework. And I have just put here some examples that are linked to trade. And of course, as you can imagine, I think I'm going back, sustainable management and use of agriculture, fisheries, forestry, which is target 10. And then we do that analysis, certainly target 8 with climate change, target 7 with pollution. And then we also have target 23, gender equality. So there's a lot of opportunities, and specifically how trade through policy instruments and through trade-related measures can support those targets. So we hope that these resources are useful for countries when they are producing their national strategies on how they could deliver and achieve their targets for the GBF. And I close by thanking you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. All of those resources and more information that I have not covered today are available through the links that are in this presentation. And certainly I'm available for any questions. And thanks again for the invitation and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Very information-rich presentation. Thank you for that. I'm noting specifically from your regional consultations, the role again of trade policy that seems to stand out across regions for market access, innovation, access to technology, financing, of course. And I just wanted to mention that this last publication that you mentioned, Nature Positive Trade for Sustainable Development, is indeed the first, I think, that links this new global biodiversity framework to trade and trade policy. So it's a really interesting read. So thank you for sharing this information. In the interest of time, I will move directly to the next segment, where several of our members have agreed to share their national experiences with the bioeconomy. But at the same time, I invite our speakers, and especially our online speakers, because I can't see them, to stay perhaps for this next segment as well, because it would be great if we have a little bit more time at the end to ask some, to give the opportunity to ask some questions. And those of you that already want to ask some questions, perhaps you can share them in the chat. And thank you for that. So moving on, we're now turning to the second part on sharing national perspectives. And it is my pleasure to first of all introduce Mr. Nicolas Palau van Hissenhoven. He's Deputy Permanent Representative of Colombia. And Nicolas, please feel free to join us also at the podium, as you prefer, obviously. But Colombia is one of the world's mega diverse countries, and it also has its own bioeconomy strategy since 2020. So it would be great if you could share a little bit more about its goals and its implementation.
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias, Svetlana. Gracias, Elizabeth. Gracias a todos los colegas de la Trade and Environment Division. Gracias al embajador Bollinger por acompañarnos hoy, a quienes hablaron antes que yo y a todos los asistentes. También gracias a los intérpretes porque me dan la oportunidad feliz de hablar en mi propio idioma. Para Colombia, el comercio es una herramienta fundamental en materia de protección del medio ambiente y de la biodiversidad. no solo es una herramienta importante, sino que es una de las mejores herramientas que hay para atajar problemas asociados con la pérdida de biodiversidad, con el cambio climático o con la polución. Tan es así que la UNCTAD en particular, desde hace varios años, ha considerado a Colombia como uno de los países pioneros en biocomercio. Hoy les quiero contar brevemente, en interés del tiempo, las dos dimensiones que tiene el trabajo que hace Colombia en materia de biocomercio y cómo el comercio puede contribuir con los objetivos medioambientales y de protección de la biodiversidad. En primer lugar, entonces, en relación con la dimensión nacional de los esfuerzos que ha hecho Colombia. Colombia tiene un Plan Nacional de Biocomercio Sostenible desde 1998. Ese plan tiene varias iteraciones, ha tenido varias etapas de 5 o 6 o 7 años. En este momento tenemos la que culminará en 2024 y está en preparación aquella que seguirá de 2025 a 2030 y que se alimentará muy probablemente de los hallazgos y avances que resulten de la COP16 en Cali. Este Plan Nacional de Biocomercio Sostenible tiene 3 aristas básicas. La primera es una dimensión normativa en la cual los principios y criterios de biocomercio, alimentados en buena parte por el trabajo de la UNCTAD, son traducidos al nivel local. La segunda es una parte importante de financiamiento. Colombia tiene un fondo biocomercio a través del cual otorga financiamiento a múltiples iniciativas y emprendimientos relacionados con mejores formas de hacer el comercio en el país. Y la tercera es la que se llama la estrategia de empresas verdes. Esta estrategia de empresas verdes está más relacionada con la realización de estándares y guías a lo largo de toda la cadena de producción, de modo que varias cadenas productivas relacionadas con la bioeconomía mejoren sus estándares y agreguen hacia la biodiversidad y la protección del medio ambiente. Este plan le ha dado beneficios a más de 10.000 empresas colombianas y ha tenido un impacto importante y en este momento está en una revisión para hacer un nuevo plan de 5 o 6 años hacia el futuro. Tal vez un ejemplo es valioso en una empresa colombiana que se llama Cafecao. Más que una empresa, es una iniciativa colombiana que se llama Cafecao, que hace productos cosméticos a partir del café y del cacao. Esta empresa colombiana ha sido beneficiaria tanto del Fondo Biocomercio como de la iniciativa de Empresas Verdes y a lo largo de la cadena, desde el proceso de extracción del recurso hasta el proceso de comercialización del mismo, a través de los segmentos de etiquetado, empaquetado, comercialización, logrado mejorar sus estándares de protección de la biodiversidad y de reducción de emisiones de carbono. De modo que Colombia ha hecho muchos avances y ha considerado siempre que el comercio es una de las herramientas fundamentales, tanto a través de estándares como a través de reorientación hacia sectores más verdes y menos brown, como a través de la publicación de principios, como a través de la facilitación de la logística asociada a empresas más verdes, ha logrado tener un plan importante de mejoras en materia de biotrade que mejoran las condiciones de la bioeconomía. Esa es la dimensión nacional. En la dimensión internacional, Colombia ha hecho avances en materia de sus acercamientos bilaterales. En varios de sus FTAs tiene cláusulas en este sentido. Y también tiene un interés importante en lograr acuerdos multilaterales sobre reglas que hagan que el comercio sea una fuerza de bien para la biodiversidad y para la lucha contra el cambio climático. Quiero mencionar solamente 3 ideas audaces sobre reglas multilaterales de comercio que se podrían negociar en esta sala, que podrían dar lugar a un mejor acercamiento del comercio en la protección de la biodiversidad y el medio ambiente. La primera es la idea que hay sobre un marco común de precios de carbono. Esa es una idea que ha ventilado la Secretaría de la OMC, en la cual ha mostrado que un acercamiento multilateral al tema de los precios de carbono es mucho mejor que múltiples acercamientos unilaterales al tema de los precios de carbono. La Secretaría ha logrado mostrar con evidencia que tener un único marco global de precios de carbono, con precios diferenciados con arreglo a variables que dependen de las capacidades y de las necesidades de cada país, es mejor en términos ambientales y es mejor en términos comerciales que otros arreglos que se derivan más bien de medidas unilaterales tomadas solo por algunos países de manera fragmentaria. Colombia apoya decididamente este tipo de esfuerzos cooperativos de construcción de reglas multilaterales en las cuales el comercio puede ayudar al medio ambiente. Una segunda idea audaz de reglas comerciales que pueden ayudar está relacionada con la tecnología que se requiere para avanzar en estos esfuerzos. Para frenar el cambio climático, para mejorar nuestras condiciones de polución o para mejorar las condiciones de biodiversidad, la tecnología es una herramienta fundamental. Nosotros quisiéramos la más rápida posible diseminación de estas tecnologías y muchas veces las reglas no están adecuadas para que se haga una difusión lo suficientemente rápida o lo suficientemente eficaz como para que el mundo entero pueda hacerse beneficiario de estas propuestas. Entonces, hay una serie de trabajos importantes en materia de reglas sobre transferencia de tecnología y sobre propiedad intelectual que sería valioso trabajar de manera colectiva en el escenario multilateral del biocomercio. Y una tercera está relacionada más con los subsidios. Tal vez ustedes han oído hablar del acuerdo sobre subvenciones a la pesca y cómo este ha tenido unos aspectos importantes en materia de protección de los océanos. Pero tal vez el punto más importante de ese acuerdo es que establece un límite ambiental a los subsidios. Acá en la OMC estamos acostumbrados a que los límites a los subsidios son límites comerciales. Miramos si son distorsiones al comercio, miramos si la competitividad o la competencia entre compañías se afecta y hemos establecido límites a los subsidios en agricultura, industriales, etc. Pero en el acuerdo de pesca lo que hicimos fue poner un techo, un límite a los subsidios basado en la sostenibilidad de esos subsidios. Este esfuerzo debería poder replicarse en otros sectores de la economía, no solamente para el caso de las subvenciones a la pesca, sino también para el caso de las subvenciones agrícolas, también para el caso de las subvenciones industriales, también para el caso de las subvenciones a los combustibles fósiles. Entonces, hay ideas en el escenario multilateral de construcción colectiva que permitirían que el multilateralismo hiciera un esfuerzo en biotrade más fuerte que el que en estos momentos tiene y que podría acompañar los esfuerzos nacionales que cada uno de nuestros países está haciendo. Nosotros esperamos que en la COP16 en Cali, en Colombia, en octubre, pues estos sean varios de los temas de discusión que pueden llegar a ser sacados adelante. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for this very interesting presentation. It was great to understand. Actually, I stand corrected that your bioeconomy strategy dates back to 1998. It's not that recent at all. And thank you for the insights on how businesses are taking advantage of this green value chain. I'm going on the website of Cafe Cow after this session. And also for bringing in the international dimension and all the useful considerations that you made. Thank you very much. So with that, I turn to our last speaker for today. This is Ms. Orsolia Frison Somogi. She's Deputy Head of Unit at the European Commission DG Agri. So Orsolia is going to talk about the EU bioeconomy strategy, which I think was first published in 2012, but perhaps she'll tell us more about it. And we would love to learn more about the evolution and functioning of this strategy. Thank you, Orsolia.
Thank you, and I think you can see me, right?
Yes, we can.
Great. Ah, great. So hello from Brussels, from the European Union. I am working in the European Commission in DG Agri. And in fact, on the bioeconomy file, we are several DGs working on, but today I have the pleasure to update you on where we are on the bioeconomy file, and it was very interesting to follow the discussion so far. We can go to the next slide, where I will just shortly present what is our definition of bioeconomy, because as you know, as has been said already by previous speakers, do not have a common definition of bioeconomy, that is the European one. But the principle seems to be more or less the same. And besides covering all the biological resources,
there seems to be some sort of an interference with the sound, so we can't hear you very well. Maybe
I cut my video.
There is a mobile device or another device that's close to your computer. There's some sort of a sound interference.
I will try to do without video. How do you hear me now?
Right now it's better.
It's better? Okay. So I said just that our bioeconomy definition at European level is coming from our strategy that has been drafted in 2018. That was the last update. And in fact, we have our strategies in 2012. It is mainly the same content as what has been said before in the definition. So it is all the sectors and systems that rely on biological resources, including all primary production sectors that use and produce biological resources, so including agriculture, forestry, fish, and agriculture, and all economic and industrial sectors that use biological resources. We can go to the next one, and it's interesting in our that, as you could have seen, biomedicines are not part of this definition at the European level so far. And there you have the key figures from the EU bioeconomy, and there you can see the important roles that bioeconomy plays, especially in the agricultural sector, and also in the food sectors. And there you can see the other sectors where, even if there is still a limited role, whether by the bio-based textiles or wood products and furnitures and paper, but in all those sectors, bioeconomy getting a greater role year by year. And there is a high innovation potential in the bioeconomy system. So far, at the European level, we are very much targeting still the research and innovation part. And now we are getting in the next stage where we are more and more focusing on the deployment phase of the bioeconomy. And as it has been said before, in fact, bioeconomy has a high job creation potential. It has a strong rural context, and we are very much targeting local valorization and the circularity principle of the bioeconomy. All in the perspective, as the previous speakers already underlined, bioeconomy is an opportunity if, and after we need to define how we can do it in a way that it is sustainable economically, but also environmentally and socially. Next slide, please. So just to define which are now in the current strategy, which are our key principles: sustainability, circularity, and cross-sectorality. So we have this holistic approach already now. And we have defined 3 priorities: strengthening the bio-based sectors, deploying local bioeconomies, and understand the ecological boundaries. So we already have this multiply sustainability principles in mind when we have defined the 14 actions that we are following for the moment. And we can already go to the next slide, where we can see the future. So as I said, we started in 2012, but currently we are updating our strategy. And our objective is to have an updated strategy by 2025. And there you can see we will try to address with this updated strategy the gaps that we have identified, increase the policy coherence, and also reinforce the territorial aspects, and also respond to global developments. And that is very much in line with the discussion that we have today. If we move to the next slide, we have extracted some information from the Council conclusions. So those are the member states, our member states who has adopted Council conclusions last year in April, that we are also considering in our update of the strategy. And I just extracted some of the ideas that we have in mind that we will consider in the update, very much focusing on the sustainability and circular principle of the bioeconomy. Also targeting on the ecosystems and the sustainability, and we are also very much on soil health question and water-related questions. One thing that I don't know how far we have discussed today, in our angle, we are also trying to focus on how we can better involve farmers and foresters and in general primary producers in the bioeconomy value chain. So it is to respond to the social sustainability of bioeconomy. So how can we do bioeconomy in a sustainable way that it also reach out and that also benefits to the biomass producers, and also in very much interrelation with the rural communities. After we have already identified the instruments, because besides having this strategic framework that can help to organize our different policies, we have identified the policies, and I will speak out the policies for which we are responsible for in DG Agri, the Common Agricultural Policy, and also we are contributing and we are also programming a part of Horizon Europe when it comes to the primary production of agriculture, forestry, and rural areas. So there, how we can better emphasize the bioeconomy role. Of course, bioeconomy plays a role in the food system transition, but we recall our European precautionary principle. I just underline that, of course, it's not only about agriculture. It has a strong industrial dimension. And there we identified, the Council has identified in their Council conclusions, the main sectors when they think that we can improve still the value chain, the bioeconomy deployment. One thing that we also consider very important is the knowledge, whether our workforce has the skills to hire, deploy bioeconomy, and how we can enhance. We have a strong focus on innovation, tools and technologies, and also that we provide innovation that is accessible to all farmers and foresters. I remember it has been already addressed by previous speeches. So we have to innovate in bioeconomy, and those innovations should respond to the diversity of the farming sector. And lately, just to recall, we acknowledge the holistic principle of the bioeconomy. That means that we also need to adapt the governance systems that are driving this bioeconomy, and also to take into account the regional and local specificities. Next slide, please. And there I come to the strategies that we have developed already in the EU countries. There you can see that in 11 member states, we already have national bioeconomy strategies. 7 member states have strategies under development. In 5 member states, we have involved in other macro-regional and sub-national policy initiatives. And in 4 member states, we have bioeconomy-related strategies. So when you see, we have 11 dedicated strategies so far. And you can see that is stronger in the western part of Europe. And in the central and eastern part of Europe, there are still progress to be made. Next slide, please. And there you can see that besides having national strategies, we also have regional strategies in many member states. 20 EU regions have dedicated strategies. 68 EU regions has strategies where bioeconomy is a key element. And in other 94 EU regions, bioeconomy at least is part of their strategy. So there you can see the very strong also local dimension of the bioeconomy, knowing that even some of our cities has their own bioeconomy strategy. Next slide, please. And there just to say some words about the BioEast initiative that concerns 11 our member state countries from Central European and Eastern European countries. They work together. They have created a macro-regional cooperation on research innovation on the bioeconomy. They are lagging behind, as you have seen in the first slide. So they put up a research innovation cooperation, and that is progressing rather well, and that helps the definition of national and regional strategies on that region. Next slide, please. And I come to the policy instruments. As I said, from DG Agri perspective, we are on the lead on the common agricultural policy, and we are also contributing with Horizon funding to progress on the innovation research needs of the bioeconomy. And we also created some instruments to interconnect the two policy instruments. That is also our way to create coherence between research and innovation and the common agricultural policy, so we can provide tools to improve the bioeconomy deployment by our farmers, foresters, and rural communities. And on the slide, you can see the different tools that we have. In blue, you have the Horizons tools, and in green, the CAP tools. In the Horizons tools, I would maybe just mention two specific issues that we have developed, the multi-actor projects. It means that we are doing our research innovation more and more with the involvement of our farmers, foresters, and rural communities, with the end users. So we hope that by doing with them the innovation and research, we will really do something that it is meaningful and they can deploy on the ground. We also have thematic networks. We have a thematic nexus which calls BBONets, which is about boosting the adoption of bio-based technologies by farmers, foresters. And at the same time, we have the CAP instruments. The European Innovation Partnership is about cooperating between farmers and the researcher on the ground, and it is a national level instruments, while the Horizon is cross-national. But the aim is the same, is to work together and innovate together. And we have many on the field of bioeconomy. And the EIP Agri focus groups, there are discussion places when you can identify the remaining gaps and needs for the future. The next slide, please. I would like to give just very few examples, so it's as concrete as possible about operational groups. So EIP operational groups, I just brought two examples. One from Winterhemp in Germany. It demonstrated that the cultivation of hemp as a catch crop is suitable for processing high-quality textiles without requiring additional land. And the biorefinery glass is the first demonstration of small-scale biorefinery in Ireland, supporting development of new business models and farmers' diversification into the circular bioeconomy. On the next slide, you can see some Horizon projects. In the Horizon projects, I will not name. I am hearing an echo. So on the Horizon project, I will not name all of them, maybe only one, the soil solutions. It's a mission soil project. And in the mission soil project, in this project, we are providing, you can still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. We aim to provide sustainable alternative derived from bio-waste, utilizing a circular economy approach. So that is just one project from the mission soil that we are supporting. On the next slide, I just wanted to speak about the CBE joint undertaking, the Circular Bio-Based Europe joint undertaking. That is our cooperation with the industry. And there we put together funding, public and private funding, and we work with the businesses. So together we develop solutions. And on the next slide, you can see some examples of the work that has been done with the successive joint undertaking. The first was from 2014 to 2020, the bio-based industries, and it was followed that by the Circular Bio-Based Europe, and that is still running. And that is the cooperation between the industry and the European Union to enhance the bioeconomy. Next slides, please. And we are mostly at the end. Just some conclusions. So, of course, this bioeconomy, we are seeing it as a tool to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. From our perspective, sustainability and circularity are an inherent part of the bioeconomy concept that should observe the three-dimensional perspective, as has been said already before. We are very much focusing on the local valorization of biomass, involvement of primary producers and of rural communities. And for that, we need targeted actions. We have, of course, this multi-sector engagement that we try to handle with the different instruments that we have, and we will intend to improve in the future. And we also think that has been presented in a previous presentation, this sustainable principle and common standards and definition can help enhancing the contribution of trade to the development of a sustainable and inclusive bioeconomy. That would be all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosario, for this very enriching presentation of the European Union's perspective on the bioeconomy and all the national and also sub-national regional actions that have been taken. Thank you also for bringing in this circularity dimension. I think it's another seminar that we'll have to organize on this, but it's also a very important link between the bioeconomy and circular technology and pathways. Now I'm very conscious of timing, but I'll give perhaps a brief opportunity if there are any burning questions in the room or online that somebody would like to ask. And I think the room is clear, but in case there's somebody online that would like to say something. And I think I understand perhaps a delegate from Kazakhstan would like to make a brief intervention.
Hello.
Hello.
Dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, thank you very much for very wonderful, insightful presentations. My name is Aynur Amirbekova and a PhD in economics. And I just wanted to also give some brief intervention that from the perspective of bioeconomy, landlocked countries like those in Central Asia also could gain a more balanced outlook and a competitive advantage. For example, in our countries like in Kazakhstan has natural conditions such as large territory, abundant natural resources and organic products that could benefit from this approach. So I think the bioeconomy agenda is now a new perspective for all the countries, especially for landlocked developing countries. And this strategy was one of the main approach in my also research back in 2017. So I'm really happy that today we discuss this topic on an international level and at the stage of, WTO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainur. From this perspective, indeed, landlocked developing countries come with their own set of specific challenges that are worth discussing and exploring. Thank you then, everyone, including our presenters. I'm really sorry we didn't have time for a set of questions. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I see Colombia. I would like to take the floor, please.
No, thank you very much, Beltana. And it's more than a question. We just I would like to congratulate all the presenters, which is excellent presentation. That they have been very interesting and enlightful. So thank you very much. I also would like to note our protest a bit for the secretariat, particularly the organizers of the public forum, because we have proposed a similar event, and related with biotrade, and it has not been accepted. So we would like to kindly ask you to reconsider our proposal for the public forum event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We relayed the information to our colleagues. Unfortunately, it's not us in charge here, but thank you for this intervention. And with this, again, apologies to our speakers that we couldn't dive in a little bit deeper. I think all of your presentations were very interesting and merit further discussions, but perhaps another time. I would just like to say that on the web page of the event, we'll have the slides also shared, and the presentation, since it's live streamed, it's also going to be available. So with this, I thank everyone, our speakers, the audience, and also our interpreters for bearing with us. Thank you and goodbye.